Now, it's very difficult to talk about a system which is still democratic, but has the potential for becoming anti-democratic. So we are in the middle of a transformation which is not yet clear where it will take us. But certainly it is a change, because never before we had a right wing that defines itself without any problems as coming from an old tradition that made some mistakes in the past. The same mistakes are dictatorship for 20 years in a country, persecution of political enemies or adversaries, putting them into jail or killing them or brutalizing them, and then persecuting the Jewish people with the special laws against them passed in 1938. Now, that past was never condemned by those who are in government now. They simply said that they made some mistakes in the past. So this is an important issue to consider. How much mistakes a democracy can bear in order to be itself and not something else. Now, recently we had some cases or some mistakes repeated in Italy. Two important cases. One last year, before the new right wing was in government, there was an assault in the national headquarters of the most important and leftist unions in Rome by the far-right movements, which was considered to be not internal to the party which won the election, but like unleashed dogs outside of it. But this attack was never criticized by the leader of today's government. The second example of violence was 3 weeks ago, with a fascist squad, attacking some students in a high school, very well-known high school in Florence, without any excuse by Meloni, but simply said she was regretting because of that violence. There is no regret in front of that. It's simply against. But she never said against. She regretted that things were they went so far from being controlled. So for all these reasons, I think there is room enough to be worried about it. Now, worried of what in particular? So I like to start thus with an important book came out in 2016 by Umberto Eco. Umberto Eco wrote a book called Ur-Fascism, that is the eternal fascism. Why did so? 2016 was very far away from now. Meloni's party had 3%. So why he was so worried? He was so worried because there was a movement going on, which is very important, actually, against immigration and forms of fascism masquerade under racism. So he started writing these essays, listing 14 characters to define the Ur-Fascism. I don't want to repeat all of them, and I would like to invite you to reflect upon some of them, of course, elaborated out of the experience after 2016. So, what are these Ur-Fascist characteristics? Let's start from the first one, which we see it every day practically in the debate, on the newspapers, and in the opposition in parliament criticizing the government on these issues. The first of these important characters of Ur-Fascism is the myth of traditional extra-political forces moving the nation. There are three of these forces. They are family, they are religion, and there is the myth of the homeland, which is not the same thing as the people. It is the nation, the homeland, which has some characteristics that not everybody can necessarily agree with, but certainly it is what they think. So family, religion, the homeland. Giorgia Meloni and other European leaders, actually, in Sweden, in Poland, in Hungary, they repeated the same story on this family, for instance. What the story is, first of all, the assault against abortion, the assault against the freedom of decision-making by individual women in the decision of when there is a law, and there are laws in our countries protecting the decision of women to interrupt to have an abortion, so-called. So this attack against abortion, without necessarily attacking the law, but trying to discuss, to develop ideas concerning the good of being a mother, the value for a woman to be a mother, as if motherhood would be the most important characterization of women. I don't want, of course, to disclaim that this is the case. I don't want to say that to be a mother is something irrelevant or secondary. But certainly, a woman has multiple possibilities in her life, and none of these possibilities is what defines us as a woman. And characteristically, Giorgia Meloni, when she wrote her book, she never defined herself a woman. She defined herself as a mother, a Christian and Italian. So woman is defined in relation to something else, not necessarily as a woman with their rights. Plural, diverse, and open to different potentials. So anti-abortion means, in this case, anti-gender. So there is an attack in our countries, not only in Italy, I have to say. It is an international movement against the philosophy of gender. And it's called, not in the name necessarily of against women, it's much more subtle. In the name of family, is an international family movement, traditional family, not other kinds of family, as they say, against nature family. So it's a process of changing the mentality. For this reason, I think that fascism should be considered itself, or we should consider fascism, not simply as a regime of 20 or 70 years ago, but we have to pay attention to the mentality of fascism, which is still very present and takes these forms. So anti-abortion, in this case, anti-gender. Anti-gender is a big issue here, because it's not simply against the women asking for having a possibility of being themselves without necessarily being constrained within the model of women they have in mind. It means something more. It means as they call them, an ideology that is meant to redefine the human relations in societies, human relations between sexes, human relations between generations, human relations between families. And thus, the attack is, in fact, against the LGBTQ plus zero tolerance for them, zero tolerance. So, well, one may be in disagreement with many of these claims for rights. But one thing is a disagreement in an open, democratic, deliberative process. And another thing is an attack on them as the quintessential example of a model of society that is going to transform our society into a declining nation. So they are responsible for a declining civilization. So that is something that is, for me at least, very difficult to understand, because it comes in a time in which human rights, individual rights, civil rights are considered to be a given. So 70 years ago, the Constitution of Italy was written. Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, they are crucial. They define rights, and they also define the obligation of the Republic to make sure that those rights are truly enjoyed, not simply formally. So to eliminate forms of discrimination that can block the enjoyment of those rights. So this is part of certainly my generation, but also my previous generation of mine and the new generations. So there are 3 generations, and now 4 with the millennium, generation of people who never had the experience of fascism and aggressive violence against rights. They are inside of the culture of rights. So what's happened then, and why these rights are becoming, are under threat now? And this is the second issue, religion. Religion is an important issue now. It's very strange, we may say, how in a quasi-secularized society, people no longer go to church. Our churches are closed. Our beautiful churches in the village, we have a medieval village, are completely closed. There are no priests around. So practically secularization is a reality, right? And yet, religion is so important. So religion is important not because of faith and not because of the belief in God. It is a cultural identification of a nation against other people. So, like in the case of gender, is against. This is another case of against. One of the issues here is, of course, the immigration people. So what they say, I'm sorry, but I have to, it's what they say, is Islamization of our communities. So the anti-immigration goes together with the defense of the tradition and the nation in the name of a Christian religion. Actually, Giorgia Meloni uses an expression that is, she wants to be, and she wants to be seen as good friend of the Jewish community, so she insists very much on calling herself Judeo-Christian, without knowing that this is a truly bad identification, but she's not aware of that, perhaps. She thinks that with this Judeo before, she cleans the tradition of anti-Semitism that comes in her own culture. Doesn't matter. So religion does. Religion means a cultural identification, which is a scandal. For a religious person, this should be a scandal, because it is a way of impoverishing religion in the name of and making it a culture, which means many things in this moment in the country, because it means education of religion inside of public schooling. It means identification of marriage, a good marriage, with a religious one. So it's a long story. It's not simply religion. It has to do with the social redefinition of human relations inside of society. This is clear. And the third element I mentioned within this first character, traditionalism, is homeland. Homeland is an interesting topic also, because populists use the term people. As we know, people is the non-existing entity. There is nothing there called the people. People is constructed, people is represented, people is defined in the Constitution. It is a construction of the democratic community or the community of the free people. But the nation is different from people. The nation has an element of extra political reality. A nation is a language, is a culture, is a story, being written story sometimes, rewritten many times to redefine the nation, is something that escapes politics and representation. And thus, to define the nation is a way of to expel from the nation those who are not identified with that idea of nation. So where starts a nation and how to redefine the nation? A few days ago, in the occasion of an anniversary very important of Renan, a famous important author, French author of the 19th century, who wrote in 1882, What is a Nation? Renan said that the nation is a plebiscite of every day. It is the will of the members of the nation to refine and redefine their belonging to the nation. With this voluntarism, with this attachment that has to do with the ability of even rewriting history if needed, eliminating bad things in the past and exalting the good things instead. So the nation is a construction not simply political, but cultural, ideological, religious, as I said, and so on and so forth. This is exactly what the group of people around Giorgia Meloni's government, her government, they are doing now. First of all, sending to all public schools invitations to read classical Italian authors, Dante Alighieri. There was a huge debate a few weeks ago on whether Dante Alighieri was a right-wing or a conservative or not. Believe me, I mean, Dante. So, not only that author, many other classical authors, as you know, Italy didn't have a political unity until recently, relatively recently, in the 19th century, and thus it was a unity of culture before that. Since ever, the language was one, since the 13th century at least, and thus one with differences, of course, but certainly one as the literary language. And so the language and the culture and the literature is what unified the country. Now, going back to this tradition, it means to redefine the nation. So that is an important engagement by the government now, to redefine the culture of the nation. And part of that is to redefine the political culture of the nation. Now, until very recently, for us, ordinary people, the constitution we had, which is a glorious constitution, which was conquered by people fighting in the war of resistance, partisan people, men and women. It was a movement of emancipation against fascism and Nazism in 43-45, which culminated with the election of a constitutional assembly, and the writing of the constitution, it took almost 2 years between 1946 and 48, and that is a good constitution, I have to say. Parliamentary constitution, strong system of rights, social rights inside. Anyway, is a kind of potential for a social democracy, never actualized, but this is. Now, the constitution is also something, has the last article, among the last articles of the constitutions, there is one that declares that is forbidden the formation and the institutionalization of a party called fascism, an ideology called fascism, is forbidden. So that constitution was born against fascism, clearly, it's evident. The identity is not a neutral identity. It's not something that was created, like perhaps in the United States, which was against the British, against the invader, against the colonializing, the colonial forces. In the case of Italy, like many cases in Europe, it was written in a process of emancipation against Nazism and fascism. Well, now there is a process of redescription of that history, and to transform in the name of pacification of the country, to pacify those who have been defeated, to pacify them with the winners. So to recreate the unity of the fatherland with those who were, until a few months ago, simply fascist enemies, and now they are part of the history of the Republic. So this is very radically hegemonic, and is a very important movement. So this is, and I put these three elements, family, religion, and homeland, inside of the first character of this Ur-Fascism, which is traditionalism. I call it traditionalism because I don't have another name, so that we can understand what I'm talking about. The second character, it is the meaning or the sense they want to have of homogeneity of values. They are, all the fascists are, and neo-fascists also are, they are worried with diversity, with chaotic, as they say several times, with chaotic diversities. And thus the aspiration of achieving a some kind of unitary values. And this means that those who are in a minority, and this is the reason of why we have to worry about it, they are considered to be like guests. They are not like all the citizens, like guests that they have to be tolerated at the most. So there is a sense that the citizens are not all of them equally deserving of the same rights. Some of them are more than others, and those who claim, like the gender ideology people I mentioned before, they are like tolerated minority. We give you rights. This is the logic. The majority gives the right to the minority, as if rights were rights of a minority. I really resist, because here we are not talking about ethno-national minorities. Here we are talking about minorities in the name of choices, individual choices of different kind of lives, like gender of others. So equal citizens who are simply different in their own choices. So they are not different religion, different language. They are not an ethnical group. They are the same citizens. And yet they are considered in such a disparaging, tolerated kind of. This is terrible. Recently in Poland, in Hungary, they came out this logic, this ideology of treating the equal equally and the different differently, right? That is. Well, it's not fascist because they don't kill, you know. Until they don't kill, there is not fascism. Huh? So the third character is inequality. That is, for me, an important issue, because equality has been always the black sheep of all fascists. When Mussolini started his long career actually before World War I, he was a socialist. Then he was expelled from the Socialist Party. He formed his own movement, Fasci di Combattimento, the combatant fascist, and he gave several important speeches. He was a great orator, by the way. He gave important speeches, one of them in particular important, against the tradition coming from the French Revolution. And he had 3 words for that. The people, the idea of the people, is very, very Enlightenment kind of, the sovereignty of the people, the idea of the individual liberty through rights, and the idea of equality. Equality is a kind of diminishing the value of competence, diminishing the value of courage, diminishing the value of duty to the country. So we are different in the service to the country, and this difference must be recognized. Equality is something diminishing, not exalting the unity of the country. So equality is something difficult to be used by them. And I will come from that at the end, because today, one of the important legislations they changed in this government, eliminating, I will come back to that, it was a law giving support to unemployed people called citizenship rights or income citizenship rights. And they canceled this law, which is going to terminate his money actually in 2 months from now, with this argument. This is a way of humiliating people, because people have to deserve what they get. They have to work, and they have to show that they are good citizens. They don't live on the shoulders of others. So if their condition is a miserable condition, they deserve what they have. So this kind of merit, I will come at the end on meritocracy, because it's an important ideology that makes them connected to neoliberalism, in my view, today. It's not simply, it doesn't come from nowhere. So the third point, after inequality, the third characteristic I agree with Eco fascism has, the obsession with belonging. The belonging to the community, to the country, to the nation, and thus the protection of borders. Physical borders, symbolic borders, borders. So anti-immigration can take a form of xenophobia in the name of belonging. And the violation of UN Convention of the Refugees and Travelers, we had recently 100 people died on the coast of Calabria, South Italy, because the Coast Guard acted, but slowly. So this is the strategy. They don't stay put. Of course, they can't, because this is against the international law. But they go slowly. And thus time becomes, of course, an important element for dissuading people from coming to the Italian shores, because we don't know whether they are going to be saved in short time. And 100 people died 3 weeks ago. So xenophobia, and they were justified. You know, Meloni, she asked for the parents of those poor people living in Germany, living in Sweden, in North Europe, because they don't want to stay in Italy, the immigrants. There is no job there. So they want to go up. They want to go to Europe. And so many of the people who died because they were not saved in enough time, many of them had a family in Europe. And this family came to Rome, and she wanted to meet with them, without journalists around, totally in secret, without television. Nobody knew. We knew also, only because some of them had the small cellular phone. So we saw something. She asked them the following question. I was shocked. Why do you or your family made the decision of having such a dangerous travel through the sea? It's very dangerous. Why you do so? I think it's outrageous, because there are people, those people came from Pakistan, from Syria, from Lebanon, from Afghanistan. They didn't have other things to, where to go. And they couldn't use an ordinary way of flying, because there is, in my country, like in other countries in Europe, I have to say, the immigration criminality. So if you are an immigrant, you are against the law. And thus, you cannot ask for entrance. You can enter only through flights and through ordinary, with a visa and some forms of connections to the country. Otherwise, there is no way. There are no humanitarian corridors. There are no ways of having access to the country otherwise. So that question she asked was a little bit outrageous to me. It is a form of racism. The fifth character is very interesting. Umberto Eco insists very much on that. It means, and I translate from a famous motto in the fascist tradition: I don't give a damn. I don't care. So I don't give a damn is an important form of individualism, in my view. It means that there is, on the one hand, daring, experimentation, no fear, they are activism, as all the fascists are. On the other hand, there is no attention to others. And this emerged very well during the COVID. The COVID was an important moment for the growth of the right wing, at least in my country. The attack on those who impose masks, the attacks against the law imposing masks, or to stay put or to stay closed, it started those years in 2020. And the idea was no mask, no vax. They had demonstrations, and the characteristic was precisely, we take care of ourselves. The government cannot tell us what we have to do. And if you are scared to be infected, it's because you are weak. So we don't give a damn. That is an important sense of kind of morality. Now, after I said, I defined these characteristics that are still today very clear, I like to tell you something interesting, which I thought a lot about that, even before coming here. But after all, why they are so popular? Why they are so popular? Because they have all these characteristics that are very antipathetic and they are very insufferable sometimes, and yet, now, when we ask who are they, Umberto Eco used to say, when we ask who are they, we should ask also who are we. Because if they are so strong in expressing themselves in this way, it means that there is something wrong in our society. I mean, it's not that they come like mushrooms from nowhere. They develop from inside. So there is something to be analyzed of our society. First of all, and this is what, if I found, yeah, here the page. In all the 5 components I gave it to you, there is an important underlining idea. The idea of, which we can call it hierarchy, as they call them. They are hierarchical people, meaning there are people who are more capable than others to lead a good life, and a successful life, a better life. We are not all equal. Thus, there is an anthropological inequality in human beings. They do believe in that. And in this moment, in this time in which we are told that you have to make your day by yourself, you have to make your life by yourself, you have to deserve what you have, it's called meritocracy. And if you cannot make it, it's your fault. The responsibility is not on society, it's on you. So there is thus this myth of the government of the competent, this myth of the government of the best, or those who are more capable, or those who are more successful. This is already here. This doesn't come from the fascist, Ur-Fascism I mentioned to you. It was produced inside of our society. Thus, there is also, as you know, those who practice political science or political theory, there is a trajectory inside of our discipline that criticizes democracy, that criticizes election, because they are a moment of ignorance, functional ignorance. There is an attack against everybody participating, even those who are not competent, they are ignorant, they are exposed to partisanship and so on and so forth. So there is inside of our society a humus, a potential for connection to those unsufferable ideas. So for this reason, it is very interesting and also explainable why this fascism of a new kind, without, of course, creating a dictatorship, not now, we don't know, the future is impossible for us to anticipate, but certainly until now, there is a correlation between a transformation inside of our society and this old, renewed ideology. I like to conclude with the following reference to Europe, because this is important. The case of Italy is not an isolated case. Of course, it is a very specific one, like all cases are, but it's not isolated. It's not isolated, it's connected to a trajectory that is very problematic in Europe. From the Americas, Europe is so far away, you don't really, but when you are there, you perceive that something is going to change. First of all, the COVID, and before the COVID, the crisis, the 2008 crisis, the COVID, and the war. This Ukraine war is tremendous for Europe, for 2 reasons. First of all, because it put the Europeans, many of them, against rights. In the name of rights, of international agreements, there was a movement, of course, against Russia in everywhere in the world, asking for sanctions, for instance, asking for intervention against Russia. Now, this produced the opposite in Germany, in Italy. This produced the opposite because it meant for these countries which depend on basic gas or gasoline from Russia, it meant to sacrifice their own interest for something they consider to be a pure ideology. So in the name of material interest, the question of international rights or international relations or international conventions becomes secondary. The second important element I see, very strong, it is the fragmentation internally to Europe. Well, this is a long discourse, but one thing at least needs to be seen. The two countries which are on the east side, close to, as a shield against Russia, are the two countries connected to Giorgia Meloni's one, that is Poland and Hungary, which are both of them the bastion of new nationalism, quasi-fascist, authoritarian kind of regime. Both of them. And they represent now, paradoxically, like Giorgia Meloni said, they represent now the West. So Giorgia Meloni, Mazowiecki, Orban, they are in this moment the representatives of the value of the West against the East. The West. So they are conservative, reactionary, and quasi-fascist, and they represent the best we can present to the world. Rights, democracy, division of power, cooperation. So they are the representatives of that. And this is, for me, very complicated, to say the least. So I think thus that we need to see the trajectory of each country in relation to the region within which these countries are. So never read Italy alone, because otherwise you see simply the aspects that are more extreme, perhaps, but you don't see the entire picture. So I would suggest that, to conclude my presentation, to see the neo-fascist phenomenon of a country that was fascist since the beginning of the 20th century, and perhaps never overcome truly the mentality, that mentality I mentioned to you, to connect it with other forms, more recent one, of authoritarianism, which come from other traditions, but they found now in a very incredible, fortunate moment of connecting their own differences into one common trajectory and destiny in this time. So I think that I'm a little bit pessimistic and not garrulous for what is going on. Is possible to defend democracy? We must defend democracy. And we must not be convinced, like many minimalists, we are in our discipline, there are many minimalist theories, no? They tell us, well, after all, Trump got a victory in regular elections. He was democratically elected. So what's the problem? Yes, indeed, what's the problem? Until at the end, right? You have to wait at the end whether he goes home or he doesn't want to go home if he loses. So until now, all our countries were convinced since ex ante that everything would go smoothly toward victory or losing without problems. Now, after Trump cases, well, needs to be pondered. We know that they entered the game, but we have to wait until the end to see whether they are going to exit the game with the same tranquility and peace with which they entered it. So this is something new for us. We were not used to think in terms of wait and see. We were, secure since the beginning, ex ante. Now, we perhaps have to ponder a little bit. So with this ponderation, I interrupt. Thank you.
Since many of you, I think, are part of the summit that began yesterday, maybe that's one way to frame this. There's so many things you've mentioned. Yesterday, the keynote speaker was Anand Giridharadas, and he spoke about many similar things. But the focus of his talk a conversation with Karim, was that yes, there's a lot of reactionary, regressive forces in our society, decide when they began, sort of, certainly the last decade and a half. But he didn't use this phrase, but it's basically what he said. It was, they're going against the tide of history, right? That the phrase used there, like barnacles on a ship that's going in a different direction. And your talk today, of course, is focusing on this ideology of the far right.
Mentality,
The mentality, as Juan Lintz, the political scientist, once called it, fascism sort of a mentality. It's not an ideology because it's not quite coherent. It doesn't add up. It's full of contradictions. But it's a mentality. It's a way of thinking and being in the world. You spoke about that. And so then the one question that obviously arises is, so why? You say they're popular. And so this ideology has been there in Italy for, it's uncanny. It's 100 years after the March on Rome that this new prime minister is inducted into office. Since the mid-1990s, the same parties that are part of this right-wing bloc have been there. The Forza Italia, the National Alliance, the precursors, predecessors, successors of the original fascist party, and the League, the Northern League, which then becomes the League. So why is it the case in Italy that it's become more, the right has become more popular over this last sort of decade and a half? Or is it the case that it was always there, but in the story you didn't talk about, which is in a sense the left? We've seen many left-wing governments in Italy from the late 1990s, Romano Prodi's and Renzi's. What's happening politically in Italy that allows this right-wing party with neo-fascist roots to become a majority in Italy in a way that even in the rest of Europe we quite haven't seen? Their traditional conservative parties have joined hands with right-wing parties in Sweden. You see it flirting and happening in France. But in Italy they broke through. So how do you understand that?
Okay, do you allow me to go a step before that, because then to go to politics, because I wanted to introduce it in my lecture, but there was too many things to be said. It's better to be clear in a few things. So the question is the following. We tend to believe, many among my disciplines, not we, some among our disciplines, political theorists and so on, they believe that there is something good in the plebeian moment. Ordinary people coming up. Or, if you want to say so, underdog people coming up. Not middle class, not working class, not those who are organized or defined according to their own position in society, but those who are excluded coming in. Well, the history in our country, in Europe, show that every time that this happens, it goes toward the right wing, never to the left. It is as if the left is incapable of, either because of the ideology or because of the strong connections with the regular jobs. We don't know, well, an economist, a sociology can help us to solve this problem. Certainly is that the left was never capable of transforming those underdogs into citizens with their own strong support of democracy. Now, in Italy, the situation is exactly this one. There is, from the political point of view, a huge abandonment of the electoral booth. People don't go to vote. The last elections, we had 60%, even less, which is something unique because we used to have 90%, 80%. So it's unique. What's happened? People who are poor, people who are underrepresented in the social, in the economic, they feel, perhaps they are right, I don't know, certainly they do feel that they have no power. So why they should go to vote? The right, the leftists, they don't represent them. They don't have none of them within their own list. If you see the list of the candidates, they are all people. I'm not a populist, so I don't want to claim that you have to be poor in order to represent poor. No. But certainly to have argument, to have proposals, to represent the ideas and the interests and the hopes or even the rage of those who are poor people. They don't have this. So the poor people, although I call them poor people, even is wrong because they are, they have precarious jobs. They work a lot and they are practically not capable of taking care of themselves because in spite of their many hours of work, they have few money from corporations to deliver, to do that and that. So small amount of money for a huge amount of works without any future. They don't have regular jobs, so they don't have a regular pension in the future. And they have a minimal condition of health. Fortunately, we still have a public school. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have that. Many people are abandoning even schooling. So you have a portion of the population that because of these draconian reforms, cutting the welfare state, they produce these poor people. These policies produce these poor people. And this policy started in the 80s. Now the outcome is here. A generation of people without a future, without knowing what to do in the future, why they should vote for the left, and when the left always thinks in terms of organizing jobs, regular jobs, a regular life. I don't want to say that this is negative, it's very positive, but there is no proposal for the others. The left never produce a proposal of what to do in order to solve the problem of the underrepresented precarious people. Never, because they accepted the idea of the system, the economic system of privatizations, deregulations. They accepted everything. And at this point, a part of the population is without representation. They go to the right. I don't know whether the right wing is going to satisfy them. This is the beginning of this government. I don't know. But they cut down taxes, they do this, I don't know exactly. I cannot tell you, but certainly the lacuna in this system comes from the left. Habermas used to say 2 years ago, in front of the explosion of populism everywhere, the responsibility is to be considering the social democrats who are not capable anymore to offer opportunity or a future, something to be done. Politics doesn't propose anything today. I don't know, perhaps in Canada it proposes something. But in Europe, politics doesn't have anymore the propositive capability of designing a future. Years ago, 30, 40 years ago, there was, the vision of the social democrats, the vision of the neoliberal, two opposite. Now, there is no visions at all. Simply a bricolage here and there for solving here and there problems. And in this situation, the left doesn't have any say, I
mean, the description of the left that you give resonates very strongly when you think about Clinton's Democrats, Blair's Labour,
definitely. Comes
Schroeder's
from there.
SPD in Germany.
Yeah, I agree.
It's interesting in countries in the South, Brazil, India, South Africa, actually the left there, because in the global South, the issue of precarity is not new. It's been there forever. So in fact, that's an interesting one. You see the rise of new authoritarians in the South, like Bolsonaro, like Modi.
Yeah.
And initially, like you say, they attacked this new welfarism of rights and saying that, that this is, the description that was used in India, this is a very povertarian agenda. It's not aspirational. But once they're in power, Modi, for instance, has been in power now for almost, actually, shockingly, almost a decade. Once they're in power, they actually don't have a coherent agenda themselves, economically. There's no new jobs being produced, growth is in decline, private investments in decline. So they end up having to use many of the same techniques of welfare of those that they've been condemning. So you see it in Brazil, for instance, with Bolsonaro versus...
And they use corruption.
Yeah.
Sorry, but they use it to give money to their own supporters. So since they create coalitions that are totally artificial and connected to the need to win the election. So they have to distribute immediately money. And so it's a very corrupted system.
Right. So what they do is they attack the language of rights, but they have these sort of transfers.
Yeah.
So in the case of Italy then, you know, one question that arises is, so Italy right now, battling like many countries inflation, has a growing debt crisis. And so one of the things a lot of commentators look at is, well, how much room and maneuver does this government have now, right? On the one hand, they were very critical of the EU, technocratic, very critical of Draghi. He was the former president of the bank. So they're reacting to that, but then they're also very much dependent on the European Union for funds and so on. And so how do you see that playing out in Italy? We've seen it playing out in Hungary and Poland, where the EU is really caught in a bind. There's lots of transgressions of rule of law, of the judiciary. There's a rising, you know, right-wing attack against many minorities. And the EU initially looks like they're disciplining these governments, but then they really can't. And so what's the relationship between what's happening in Italy today and Brussels?
Well, first of all, the European Union in relation to Italy is, not only Italy, but Italy in particular, is in a special moment because through the because of the COVID, the European Union was able for the first time in its life to have a community budget. That is the entire European Union with one budget for only one problem. The problem of, solving the disaster that was provoked by the COVID in terms of economic infrastructure, healthcare, and schooling and technology. So the European Union gave to Italy, thanks to the former government, well, not Draghi government, the previous one, was capable of obtaining a huge amount of billions, $255 billion, to be distributed organizedly and very, under inspection of these different sectors. So this government is going to administer this fantastic amount of money coming from the European Union. So he's not anti-European Union. He's an ally with his friends, authoritarian friends that I mentioned before, the Polish, the Swedish. The Sweden is a little bit out of the European Union, and the Hungary, together to attack the bureaucracy of the European Union that doesn't allow to use easily this money. So it is a very utilitarian attack, because de facto they really want to have those money with less control, all of them. So they have a lot of possibilities to do what they can do, unfortunately for us, because they can stay in power for many years until all this process has been completed, which will take several years.
And do you see today in Italy? You say the left, abandoned the field. They did not organize. They did not represent. Do you see them now that there's this new right-wing government in power that they're responding in some way?
The discourses would be very long. Too much. I like to say two things. First, I do believe that the decline of political parties in those democracies based on parties has been a disgrace, because even social movements are in decline, because social movements are important because they have a correlation with parties toward which they go and they give and with inputs, If you don't have the parties, also social movements decline. This is the situation we have in Italy. We have very few social movements. We are not France. In France, there are movements all the time. We are really anesthetized in terms of social movements, because the parties have been slim, only institutionally based. There is a term to define them, the term of cartelization, cartel parties. So they are simply inside of the institutions. Now there is something new. This is the second part of my answer. Something new. The opposition party coming from the tradition of the left, old tradition of the left, plus the social Christians, Catholics, so a combination of social Catholic Christians and former socialists and communists. They put together a party called Democratic Party, which was born in 2007. It was always very terrible, meaning up and down, without producing any real thing, but all of them inside of the institutions. It produced institutional officers all the time. Now, recently, after Meloni was got in power, and so they lost practically, they have to refine themselves a kind of, as they say, we need to have a soul, as if you go to the market to buy a soul. Anyway, we need to find the soul. And they have a new leader. She's a woman. She's a fantastic young woman. She's 38 years old. Her name is Ellie Schlein. She has 3 nationalities. She's the part of a Jewish community, fled from Europe in the 30s, and another part of anti-fascists of Italy. So very interesting combination. She now is the leader of this party, and she's very active, and she's very prominent. We hope that the establishment internal to the party doesn't destroy her leadership, because factions and strong connections between leaders inside second row, third row leaders sometimes can be very divisive. So that is the only hope, in my view.
It converges with what we were talking about last night about the persuaders, people who have multiple identities and can cross these communities.
Oh, she's fantastic.
Yeah.